Earlier this month, June 2nd, marked the 100th anniversary of the landmark Indian Citizenship Act, which granted citizenship to all native-born, non-citizen indigenous people. Now, during its centennial, it is getting renewed attention. Joining us this morning to share all about it is celebrity historian Raffi Andonian. Good morning, Raffi.
Good morning, and I even brought with me these $1 coins that are recently released. On the head side is Sacagawea, and this series of Native American $1 coins has existed since 2009. However, each year they have a new edition, and this year's edition has, on the tail side, as we would call it, the commemoration to the 1924 Indian Citizenship Act for the 100th anniversary, as you mentioned. So that's specifically commemorating what we're talking about. And the symbolism on it is you have an eagle staff that means a lot to many of the tribal cultures, and a U.S. flag that are intersected, so that it shows that dual citizenship that American Indians often participate in.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing this, by the way. So for folks who may have been hearing about this for the first time, what is the Indian Citizenship Act?
So 100 years ago, in 1924, on June 2nd, what you have is the passage of the Indian Citizenship Act, which is really important because it settles a debate that had been going on for well over a century, since the days of the Constitution creation, actually, on what exactly is the role of American Indians and citizens, especially particularly birthright citizenship. You see, the original Constitution had this exception for Indians not taxed, as a term that they put, and I'm not going to get into technicality of what that means, but it basically meant that most American Indians could not participate in citizenship. However, in 1857, with the Dred Scott decision, which many people know because it's a big decision in the context of American slavery, but also buried in that decision is a pathway to allowing for citizenship for certain tribal peoples. However, after the Civil War, shortly after the Dred Scott case, with the 14th Amendment, which invalidated the Dred Scott case, in part granting birthright citizenship to everyone and in part providing equal protection of the law. However, if you look at it closely, there is an exception for Indians not taxed, as they put it, which applied to more than 90% of indigenous population in the United States. So most of them could not participate in citizenship. So the reason that the 1924 Act matters so much is because it finally settles this question and this issue on if you're born in the United States, even if you're tribal, because who had been excluded, then now you cannot have a barrier to citizenship, and now you can access the citizenship. Now, it didn't get applied perfectly by every state, but that was the beginning of removing that barrier and settling that question. It was by President Calvin Coolidge, who participated a lot on a lot of tribal issues, including with the Committee of 100, as they were known, which was a mixture of both tribal and Anglos peoples that came together to deal with the Indian issue, as they called it. And they came to the White House, and in the process, what happened is, for example, one of the key activists from the Committee of 100 told them and said, look, we want to be able to both preserve the best of our civilizations from the past, but also participate in this country that we love and want to keep building. There's this dual citizenship concept. So when you ask what this Indian Citizenship Act is, it's not just important for allowing access to citizenship, which had been allowed in certain contexts in the past, often in trade of giving up tribal membership, but now you didn't have to give up tribal membership, and you can participate more fully. About 1/3 of the American Indian population at the time, more than 1/3, was not a citizen yet. But also, going back to that Coolidge point with the activists that were there, what they were trying to say is it gets at the concept of dual citizenship, not the legal, not just the legal aspect, but the dual citizenship in terms of culture, what she's talking about when she says we want to preserve the civilization of the past but still participate in this country. That's symbolic also. It's not just about the legal rights, but it's also kind of a cultural identity thing. And I think this really captures that dual citizenship that we're talking about. Hence, why when we look at this, you have the dual flags, or the eagle staff and the American flag. Now that symbol makes a lot more sense when you know the story behind the concept of dual citizenship.
It really does, and not surprising with the United States' troubled past, but it blows my mind to even think, hey, you know, they technically weren't citizens, even though they were born here. This is their land. So we only have a few seconds left, but if you can just briefly mention the impact a century later.
Well, believe it or not, there are still some court cases that challenge it from some tribal people who say that it doesn't give them the sovereignty because it wasn't going through each particular tribe. And the other impact, so there's still an issue that's still discussed and fleshed out on how to execute and continue to fulfill on that. And the other thing I'd point to is 2007, the United Nations had a Declaration for Indigenous Peoples' Rights, and in it they cite the citizenship, importance of citizenship and how to access it, which is based upon the 1924 law that we're talking about. So it still continues to impact us today and even internationally in modern times.
Wow, so something we can still take away and learn from. Raffi, you're always a wealth of knowledge. We learn something new every time you show up. Thank you so much for being here today. For more information about Raffi Andonian and his endless amount of wealth of knowledge, head on over to celebrityhistorian.com.